Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, Game 7 is coming up. A huge Timberwolves win in Game 6, a dominant 45-point victory, holding the Nuggets to just 70 points in Game 6 on the Target Center floor. We'll break down a masterful defensive performance, harkening all the way back to a week plus ago, Games 1 and 2. We'll break down what happened, plus the Wolves did enough offensively and hit enough of those checkpoints we talked about they needed to do in Game 6 in order to come out with this dominating win. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And happy day after the biggest win in Timberwolves history, right? Or at least in 20 years. The biggest win since Game 7 of the second round in 2004. And here we are, Game 6 of the second round, bringing up only the second ever Game 7 in Timberwolves franchise history, upcoming Sunday in Denver. I said it in the open, a masterful defensive performance by the Timberwolves. That's where much of the focus today is going to be on. But we also have to talk a little bit about the offense, about what changed in this game in terms of the pace the Wolves played at, the shots they took, the quality of shots they got, Anthony Edwards' decision-making. We'll talk about all that today. But, man, what a win for the Timberwolves. What a redemption for the Timberwolves defense overall, Rudy Gobert individually, Anthony Edwards as well. Lots to get to here today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken, and that's with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. I also want to mention the live postcast that we do after every single Wolves game. The last episode, if you're listening to the audio version of Locked On Wolves right now, the last episode before this in the feed is the postcast from Thursday night with Luke Inman. Nope, I think Sam Ekstrom hosted with Tyler Metcalf from Katie Supis. It is a rotating cast of characters. I actually hosted Tuesday nights after Game 5. And we'll, of course, have another live postcast after Game 7 on Sunday, win or lose. So make sure to check that out. It's live on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube immediately following each Wolves game. And then we post the audio to the Locked On Wolves audio feed as well. All right, let's go ahead and get into this. There's lots to get to. The big story, though, of course, is once again the Timberwolves defense. And, of course, that was the story, a week ago, 10 days ago, coming out of Games 1 and 2 in Denver, Minnesota holding the Nuggets under 100 points in both games. But then both games in Minnesota, Games 3 and 4, the Wolves gave up at least 115 in each of those games. And Denver kind of just kept doing their thing. And in Game 5 in Denver on Tuesday of this week, and the Timberwolves, vaunted defense, it was like, okay, well, the discourse was all about Rudy Gobert being unable to guard to guard Nikola Jokic. And of course, I talked on the show on Thursday about this was so much more about Jokic being the best player in the league, the best player in the world by far, at the peak of his powers, on a heater. All of the above are true. The perfect storm to just dismantle the Wolves in Game 5, and that's exactly what happened. And Rudy Gobert was fine defensively. Jokic just made a bunch of nutso shots. The Timberwolves were able in this game they did throw some additional looks at Nikola Jokic. That was the biggest thing. And we saw that in Game 2, right? With no Rudy Gobert. It was the occasional double, the occasional trap on the catch, the occasional just straight up coverage. They tried to have a little bit of a free safety action in Game 2 with no Rudy. But it was more just that they were changing up the looks. And they did a better job of that in Game 6 than they did in Games 4 and 5, especially, where Minnesota didn't always bring a double. A lot of times it was Cat. There was one possession, I think it was second quarter. No, I guess it would have been third quarter, early third quarter the game was pretty much over after the first 5 minutes. And we'll talk about the first quarter here in a minute, but I want to start here because the defense to me is the most important thing and how the Wolves went about it. But there was a possession in the third quarter that sums up this game perfectly. Nikola Jokic had his back to the basket, kind of free throw line extended on the right side of the floor. And I believe it was Mike Conley that provided the initial double. Towns was guarding Jokic. Conley provided a double. Jokic kicked it to Murray or whoever Conley was guarding on the perimeter. It probably wasn't Murray. Whoever it was in the right slot. Conley went back to prevent an open three or a drive. The ball went right back to Jokic. Conley recovered to Jokic. So now there's another double. The ball goes back out to the perimeter. But at this point, the Timberwolves have rotated. And so they actually end up Xing out to the perimeter where Conley ends up back at the top of the key, at the top of the circle. And Jaden McDaniels ends up coming to guard his initial coverage, his initial guy, his initial assignment, just like basically in the slot on the right side of the floor. And then McDaniels comes down to double Jokic. So you have 3 different double teams by 2 different secondary defenders on the same possession, and they still recover to get a contest and a 3-point attempt because they X'd out again on the other side of the floor. And the rush to the perimeter for Minnesota to contest literally everything was so incredibly impressive in this game. It was shades of game 2, but with Rudy Gobert protecting the rim. It's the multiple different coverages that they showed Jokic that made life so miserable for him in this game. And Joker ended up with 22 on 19 shots, which isn't efficient. It's fine. It's not horrible. I mean, he only had 3 turnovers. He also only, by the way, had 2 assists because of the way that the Wolves are bringing doubles with length. Bringing doubles with length and challenging his vision. Trying to muck things up to make them more complicated for Joker in the post. And they did that. They also made him shoot 4 3-pointers, and he missed all of them. 2 assists to 3 turnovers and 0 of 4 outside the arc for Jokic. And this game was, again, I think a better defensive game for the Wolves against Jokic just because they switched it up, not because Rudy did a poor job in game 5, but because Jokic was so great in game 5. And in this game, it was both, right? Jokic also didn't have, obviously, as good of a game individually. He missed a couple shots. He had some go in and out, like not bad looks. Not impossible looks like he was making, and he made a impossible and one early in this game too. It was a better strategy for Minnesota, and they executed it better. The defense was on a string. They were almost pre-rotating in this game. They were pre-rotating, really. Like they would double Jokic, and the next defenders in line were now this is exactly what you're supposed to do, but they were half rotating to the next Denver offensive player in the perimeter. So the double would come, and then the other guys on the perimeter would shift like a half a slot, if you will. So they were essentially trying to each guard 2, which is exactly how a double is supposed to work. But sometimes guys get caught ball watching, or they get caught watching their man, and they get kind of lost in the wash. They can get picked off more easily by screens, or they get caught ball watching and they get back cut on. Or they just don't communicate. They don't turn their head. They don't talk. And in this game, the Wolves were on a string. They absolutely were. The rotations were crisp. The contests were there all the time for Minnesota. And the pre-rotations for Minnesota were so huge. And then also the recovery. Because when the ball would swing, they would recover in time and then be able to shift back. It was very much what we saw in games 1 and 2. And it was extremely impressive. And it also, early in the game, allowed the Wolves to force some turnovers. And I want to talk about that. I want to rewind a little bit and talk about the first quarter. I want to talk about Jamal Murray and the Wolves covering Jamal Murray. Even if he didn't want to give credit to Anthony Edwards in his post-game press conference, I'm going to give some credit to Anthony Edwards. We'll talk about the Wolves offensively, Mike Conley's impact in his return. Still a ton to get to here today. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than a billion, with a B, a billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. They're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LocdownNBA. That's linkedin.com/LocdownNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? If so, no doubt you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, let's rewind and talk first quarter. So Minnesota gets down 9-2. And there were shots in and out for both teams early. The Wolves missed a couple. Ant missed a layup. He got all the way jetted to the rim and just kind of overshot the layup, and it was too strong off the glass. Denver missed a couple of easy ones. Somebody else on the Wolves missed an easy one. It was 9-2 Denver before Minnesota calls a timeout. And then they go on a 20-0 run. 20-0 to put them up 22-9. The run ends up being 27-2 at its peak. And they closed the quarter, if you expand it out a little bit further, 29-5 after being down 9-2. And that meant that they won the quarter 31-14. The game was over then. It really was. Obviously, being a closeout game, you have to, it wasn't, but it was. It felt over, right? Side note, by the way, the Wolves went on a run in the fourth quarter of this game that was 24-0. So they had separate runs in this game of 20-0 and 24-0. How crazy is that? I'd love to see a stat. I'm sure there's an Elias stat out there somewhere. But how many times in history has a team gone on multiple runs of 20-0 or greater? 20 yeah, I guess that's the right way to say that. Nuts. 20-0 in the first quarter, 24-0 in the fourth when the game was already decided. But that led into, in the midst of that, it officially became garbage time based on the substitutions of both teams. But crazy first quarter run. It was fueled by the Timberwolves defense, of course. It was fueled by forcing turnovers from Denver. And for the game, Denver actually only had 12 turnovers, but a lot of that was early, first of all. And also, the Timberwolves as a team only committed 6 turnovers, which is also crazy. And to me, that's probably the least sustainable thing about this game for Minnesota is that they only turned it over 6 times. Of course, they were one of the league's most turnover-prone teams for much of the season. They finished bottom 10 in terms of offensive turnover rate. So Denver turns it over 12 times. Minnesota turns it over 6. Minnesota scored 19 points off of 12 Denver turnovers. And I think this stat matters even more so than the points off turnovers. I like looking at total turnovers, and I like looking at fast break points more than the total points off turnovers. The Wolves won fast break points 18-9. And that was a key sticking point after the last game. And I harped on that consistently on Wednesday and on Thursday this week. Or I guess it would have been, Wednesday, Thursday. I don't know. The days are running together. Wednesday show and Thursday show. The Timberwolves transition defense was horrendous in Denver in Game 5. It was much better in this game, but it was more about the Wolves defense feeding into their offense and giving them easy offensive possessions. I think the least talked about thing that was significant from Games 3 to 5 was Denver's defense and how well they played defensively in the half court. And on the flip side, how bad the Wolves' transition defense was. Well, that was flipped on its head once again in what's been a topsy-turvy series overall across the 6 games thus far. The Wolves won fast break points 18-9. They turned the Nuggets over 12 times and only turned it over 6 times themselves. And I thought the Wolves' transition defense, there weren't very many transition opportunities, period, for Denver. But Wolves' transition defense was much better. and the early easy looks generated by the turnovers. There was a McDaniels dunk. There was an Ant dunk very early in this game. Both of those helped kind of set the tone, right? It discourages the opponent. It fires up the crowd, which further discourages the opponent. And it gives confidence to guys like Jaden McDaniels, who had an early three-pointer go in and out. I didn't think it was a particularly great shot in terms of it wasn't really in the flow of the offense. And then he forced another one that rattled in. And I think that was actually before the dunk. And then at that point, it was on. Like Jaden McDaniels was ready to play. He's certainly ready to play defensively from the jump, as he almost always is. But that gave him the confidence to be so good offensively. And as the Wolves built this massive lead, his confidence offensively was undeniable. And I think part of that stemmed from that early run, from the early three-pointer and then the dunk he got in transition after a steal from, I think, Anthony Edwards. So that was really great early in this game. Yes, Denver missed some shots early in the game, and that was a somewhat annoying topic at the halftime show on ESPN. I know Bob Myers really wants to pick Denver in every game. I get it. But both him and Stephen A. Smith were very concerned with Denver. No, I should say concerned. We're very stuck on the fact that Denver missed some open shots early. And they did. They missed a small handful of open shots. But guess what? So did the Wolves. And then the difference was the Wolves kept getting open shots, and they started making them. Denver did not. Denver did not get very many open shots. Stephen A. Smith made a comment like, oh, Aaron Gordon was left. Yeah, Aaron Gordon was left open by design. Remember after, I guess it was 2 games ago, when he made 10 straight shots, and I said that would never happen again in his life. Now, he was 4 of 7 in this game. The Wolves would actually like him to shoot the ball more. But 2 of 4 on threes, and both of his misses were forced, contested shots he shouldn't have taken. And one was a short closeout in the corner, one of his makes, and then the other one was an above the break attempt that, like, the Wolves will let Aaron Gordon shoot that open or not any day of the week. The Timberwolves, other than the first half of the first quarter, Denver was not getting open three-point attempts with frequency. There were a couple of Jamal Murray ones. Murray only scored 10 points at 18 shots, so he only made 4. Not a whole lot to pick from. I think both of his threes were wide open. The Wolves just lost him in the wash, and that happens sometimes when you're concerned about other guys. But he never found a rhythm in this game. Actually, now's as good a time as any to talk about guarding Jamal Murray. Anthony Edwards took on that primary assignment. So Cat was still the primary on Jokic. Ant was still the primary on Jamal Murray. And as much as Murray in the postgame press conference did not want to give credit to Anthony Edwards, he was on him like white on rice. It was a very impressive defensive performance from Anthony Edwards. And when that got switched, if it was Jaden McDaniels on Jamal Murray, like, he did fine. He did very well. I shouldn't say fine. He did awesome. But Ant was the one that was being so physical with him. And Jamal did, once again, he did not want any of the smoke. Like, he got backed up near the timeline a couple of times, and it wasn't as quite the same as the Denver game, or the game in Denver in game 2, because it was only Ant. There wasn't a double team. It was just Ant, like, pressuring him near the timeline. And Jamal Murray was like, no, why are you playing so hard? I don't want this. He didn't. He had 10 points on 4 of 18. And Anthony Edwards was a massive reason for it, whether or not he wants to admit it. He can talk about his elbow all he wants. And you know, I'm sure it affected him. But it didn't keep him from still shooting the basketball 18 times, despite the fact he couldn't make a shot. Awesome job by Anthony Edwards on Jamal Murray. A great job by Minnesota being more physical. And Aaron Gordon didn't bring the ball up the floor nearly as much in this game as he had the previous 3 games. The Wolves also continue to do a great job on Michael Porter Jr. He hit a 3 early, and that was like the only thing he did. He was 1 of 6 outside the arc, 8 points on 9 shots for Michael Porter Jr. And actually, what I want to do next is I do want to talk about the depth and the impact that the Wolves bench. This series has gone how the benches have played, which is like, I'm not at all saying cause and effect here, like, oh, bench play equals a win, but it's notable. And it's crazy too, because we're not talking about close games. Like, these are not close games, which is a whole other topic that's very weird. But I want to talk about depth. I want to talk about Mike Conley's impact, and kind of a couple more notes related to the Wolves, I guess, on both ends of the floor. So that's what we'll do next, and that's how we'll close out the show here on this Friday. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. I guess let's put a bow on the defensive performance for Minnesota. So credit to the game plan, to the coaching staff, obviously, and then the execution of the game plan with doubling Jokic, giving him different looks, forcing the ball out of his hands. The multiple efforts to double from multiple places on the same possession was so impressive in this game. There was also a first half possession where there were tons of rotations, where guys were picking other guys up. And then it ended in a Murray kind of tough reverse pivot turnaround from the left side of the floor that McDaniels blocked that ignited a break the other way. Those were that one, and then the multiple doubles on Jokic in the third quarter are the two that really stand out in my mind as just really impressive defensive possessions. But there were many of those in this game. The pre-rotations, the Xing out on the perimeter to contest jumpers, the funneling the ball to guys that don't want to shoot it like Aaron Gordon, or at least the Wolves want to shoot it like Aaron Gordon, and then forcing Jamal Murray into a 4 of 18 shooting night, primarily because of Ant's physicality, but also McDaniels' length. And once again, pressuring the ball as far down the floor as they can. Offensively, we haven't talked much about Ant yet. And Ant had a, game high 27, a relatively quiet 27, other than the nasty crossover hezzy move he pulled on Michael Porter Jr. in the third quarter. That was kind of like, okay, this is it now. We're here. This thing's about over. And, a couple of step back threes, one from in the left corner early as the Wolves were pulling away in the first half, and then one that was like another dagger, I think shortly after the dunk in the third quarter on the left, in the left slot, another step back three that he hit. But overall, offensively for Minnesota, Mike Conley's presence, of course, he missed game 5 with the, they called it an Achilles at the time, but the sore calf, sore leg, sore lower leg, we'll call it that. Conley was awesome. And like you look at the line and 13, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, no turnovers. Actually, that is a really good line. But it was let me say this. I do think that the like calm, poise, floor general, like that stuff gets overplayed a little bit at times. But when you see performances like this by a guy who is all of those things, he's calm, he's poised, he is a floor general. That is why all of these, I don't want to say stereotypes, but all these like adjectives are thrown around related to point guards. Because, well, Mike Conley is not like the initiator of the Wolves offense. He doesn't always bring the ball up the floor. He's the guy, the ball always finds its way to Mike Conley when things do need to get settled down. And he always makes the one play that I think encapsulates Mike Conley as a leader, as a veteran leader, and I'll say it again, a floor general, was early in that Wolves run in the first quarter when they were trying to build on it. I don't know what the score was at the time, but it was early in their 20-0 run. Off of an offensive rebound, the ball got back tapped. Conley had a wide open three in the left slot, and he kicked it to Ant in the corner, who was also wide open. Neither one was more wide open. There was somebody that was going to get off a late contest on Conley had he shot it. But if he had shot it, it would have been considered a very wide open, or whatever that designation is, on NBA.com. Just a super wide open three. Instead, he kicks it to the corner to Ant. Now, Conley is a better three-point shooter than Anthony Edwards. But Ant's in the corner. It's unguarded. It's a catch-and-shoot three. Conley knew that Ant would have it in rhythm by kicking that pass into the corner to him. And he also knew that could get Ant going. That could get the crowd going. It's exactly what happened. The wherewithal, the basketball IQ, the call it the emotional IQ of understanding the pulse of the team, the pulse of his superstar teammate, the pulse of the Target Center crowd, to kick that ball into the left corner and just hand it to Anthony Edwards on a platter for him to knock down a wide open corner three to help spur this run for Minnesota was such a smart play by Mike Conley. Just fantastic. The overall ball movement and the poise, using that word again, of the Wolves offense was very real. It was palpable because of the presence of Mike Conley. And yes, Anthony Edwards played much better in this game than he did last game. He did. The decision-making was better. He picked his spots. He talked post-game about how Chris Finch told him, don't lose your aggression. Don't lose your aggressiveness because they're playing you a certain way. And he didn't. Last game, in the loss in game 5, he had 18 points out of 15 shots. He only took 2 more shots in this game. He only took 17 shots from the floor. And he attempted and made the exact same number of free throws. He was 7 of 8 from the line. The difference was he attempted 4 more threes and he made 3 of them. That's it. And the decision-making in the last game wasn't great. It led to the 4 turnovers, and he had 9 assists last game, but he also had 4 turnovers, and he was 5 of 15 from the floor. In this game, he made quicker decisions. He made better decisions. And also Mike Conley was out there to kind of help that along. A really great Anthony Edwards performance. Some great highlights mixed in there. It wasn't the 43-pointer. Oh, I will say, though, this is crazy. If you're a regular listener, you know that I like to talk about how I don't like singling in plus minus, but then I'll still mention it. But that's because if there's an outlier or something really something that stands out, I think it's important to mention. There's nothing about Denver's that stands out. Like, good on the list, everybody's a massive negative, right? For Minnesota, only one player was better than a plus 30. And this is a game the Wolves won by 45. Only one player was better than a plus 30. Anthony Edwards was a plus 43 in this game. 13 points better than the next best Minnesota player in a plus minus. It's crazy. Let's see. Okay, we talked about Conley. We talked about the Wolves' ball movement on offense. Oh, last thing before I get to some quick studs and duds. The Timberwolves' depth in this game was a massive advantage. And we talked about it after games 1 and 2, that the bench of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, to a lesser extent Kyle Anderson, Monte Morris, is better than, should be more consistent than, a Denver bench of Justin Holiday, Reggie Jackson, Christian Brown, guys who they didn't trust or haven't trusted, and then Peyton Watson, who they weren't trusting either. That wasn't the case in game 5. It was the case in this game. In fact, Denver's bench did not score a single point until the 4th quarter. Christian Brown had a dunk or something early in the 4th quarter. That was the first time Denver scored from their bench. And if you take out garbage time, that dunk from Christian Brown was the only bucket from the field that their rotation guys made, that their bench rotation guys made. They made 3 buckets in garbage time. Zeke Naji, Julian Strother, and Jalen Pickett each made a bucket. Christian Brown had a dunk in the first minute of the 4th quarter. That was it. Out of Reggie Jackson, Christian Brown, Justin Holiday, and Peyton Watson. Peyton Watson made a free throw late, but nobody else made a field goal at all from the Wolves, from the Nuggets bench. On the flip side, Minnesota's bench was good enough. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he found a rhythm late. I think all 3 of his threes, at least 2 of them, were basically garbage time threes that maybe that gets him into a rhythm leading into game 7 on the road. But Nickeil had 9 points on 3 made threes on 5 attempts. Naz went for 10 and 11 in this game. He shot just 4 of 12 and missed 4 3-pointers, a couple ill-advised, but put the ball on the deck and looked good when he did that, when he got into the paint. And again, active on the glass, which is super important. Kyle Anderson was fine. I know the Wolves think that they've got a decent no cat, no ant lineup that they started the 2nd quarter with. I think it's dicey, but you got to do what you got to do, I guess, in order to get Ant a few minutes of rest here and there. Thankfully, he didn't have to play the last 9 minutes, and Ant only ended up playing 34 in this game, 34 minutes. So Wolves depth, a big thing. That has been a thread in this series, is how is the bench playing for both of these teams? And the Nuggets bench was not good in games 1 and 2. The Wolves bench was not good in games 3, 4, and 5 for the most part. And then we flipped it again here in game 6. And this is such a weird series. I mean, the Wolves win by, games 1 and 4 were quote unquote close, where one was a 7-point game, one was an 8-point game each team winning one of those. Game 2 was a 26-point Wolves blowout win. Game 3 was a 27-point Nuggets blowout win. Game 6 was a 15-point Nuggets blowout win. Excuse me, Game 5. Game 6 was a 45-point Timberwolves blowout win over the Nuggets. Just crazy. Like, could we get a close game? These are clearly two of the best 3 teams in the NBA. They match up well. They played some great regular season games. Why aren't we getting a close game? Game 7, I'm sure, will be an absolute nail biter now that I'm saying this, but that'd be a lot of fun. I think we'd all enjoy that. Now, I wouldn't mind a Wolves blowout win in the least bit, but a close game would be a lot of fun. Real quick, studs and duds. Obviously, for Minnesota, Anthony Edwards was great. 27 points on 8 of 17, 4 of 9 outside the arc. The third straight game, he was 7 of 8 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, just 1 turnover in 34 minutes, and a game high, by far, plus 43 for Anthony Edwards. Great decision-making, awesome highlights, amazing defense on Jamal Murray, whether Jamal wants to admit it or not. A great game for Anthony Edwards. Jaden McDaniels, 21 points, 4 rebounds, 8 of 10 shooting, 3 of 5 outside the arc, 2 of 2 at the line. He added a couple of blocks, 4 rebounds, an assist, and a steal. An awesome Jaden McDaniels game. This Jaden's got to show up for Game 7. And that's the biggest thing, right? It's the consistency with Jaden. But he was amazing in this game. My third stud is Mike Conley. 13 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 0 turnovers, 5 of 9 shooting, 3 of 6 outside the arc, mixed in a block for good measure. And was the straw that stirs the drink for Minnesota, kept them composed, kept them on task, if you will. A great Mike Conley game. Not a stud, but a shout out to Rudy for the bounce back performance. Not that he was the problem last game, but a good performance. 14 rebounds helped the Wolves have a 19 board advantage in this game. I will say Denver missed 60 shots. They were 26 of 86 shooting. Large credit to the Wolves defense for that. Of course, there's going to be a bunch more rebounds to have, but the Wolves actually still out offensive rebounded Denver, despite missing 14 less shots than the Nuggets. The Wolves grabbed 1 more offensive rebound. So the work on the glass that I said before this game was going to be vital for Minnesota, they came through. They defensively rebounded very well. Rudy was a huge part of that with 14. Cat had a relatively quiet game. He had just 10 points on 10 shots and missed all of his 3-point attempts, but he had 13 rebounds, 5 assists, only 1 turnover, and only 3 fouls in this game. Nobody on the Timberwolves committed more than 3 personal fouls, and only 1 player in the Nuggets committed more than 3 personal fouls. It was refreshing to see there not be a crazy number of fouls called in this game. It was awesome on both sides. Duds, I don't have any for the Wolves. I don't. Kyle Anderson was good in his minutes. Missed his 2 shots for the field, but he got to the line a couple of times. Probably should have gotten to the line one other time. 3 assists, a steal, a block. It was great. Rudy was good. I know he only had 8 points. He played well. We talked about all the studs already. Great. Like, everyone played really well. No duds at all for me in this game. Game 7 on Sunday. I don't even know how to predict this. This is my last show before Sunday. Of course, we'll have, well, actually, no. I mean, the postcast is the one before this. So we'll have a live postcast after the game Sunday. I guess I have to make a pick. It's going to be close. I know I keep saying this. I thought Game 6 was going to be a close Wolves loss. I'm going to say Game 7 is a close Wolves win. I'm going to say it comes down to the final possession. The Wolves hang on and win by a bucket or 3 points or something. I'll say they win by 3 on Sunday. Actually, let's look real quick at the and see where the FanDuel line opened here for Sunday. I'm sure Denver's favored by, 2.5? Oh, wow. Denver's favored by 4.5 right now on Sunday. 4.5 point favorites for Denver at minus 110. Timberwolves are underdogs. Money line minus 188 for Denver, plus 158 for the Wolves. This is late Thursday, early Friday morning, according to FanDuel. So I'm going to say the Wolves win a close one by a possession. We'll call it 3 points, but within a possession on Sunday in Game 7. We'll have the live postcast following Wolves Nuggets. I believe it'll be Luke and Jack on Sunday. And I'll be back on Monday with the post-game podcast, win or lose, bright and early Monday morning. And again, if you haven't listened to the live postcast from the show from the game, I should say, Thursday night, it's the episode before this on the audio. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available now on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7. Cover the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. The Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.